Good afternoon. This is Bill Acker from New York Best. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's webinar entitled Energy Storage Opportunities with New York State Electric Utilities. We're delighted to have a number of members from Con Edison to be with us today to go over some of the opportunities that presently exist and some of the strategies and thought processes going on at Con Ed, and also rounding out some of the other activities that are going on around the state that New York Best will be covering. We have a few logistic announcements before we get into the webinar. And so with regard to how you ask questions on the webinar, please note that all the phone lines are muted on the webinar, so you'll ask questions through the chat function of the webinar service. So we ask that you type your questions into the chat box. You can ask questions throughout the course of the webinar. We will be collecting the questions and in some cases aggregating them together. And at the end of the session, we will have a Q&A session to address as many questions as possible. We also do note that we do ask you to fill out a short survey as you exit the webinar. These surveys are important to continue to bring forward the best quality webinars that we can, so we do ask for your input on those. I would also note that today's webinar is being recorded and will be available upon request following today's webinar for further viewing. So with that said, we're very fortunate that today's webinar is supported by the NYSERDA Soft Cost Program, and we have Ben Falber, who was leading the soft cost efforts at NYSERDA for this program, to tell you a little bit about NYSERDA's efforts on energy storage. So let me turn it over to Ben before we get into the utility discussions. So moving to the slide, please go ahead, Ben.
Great, thank you, Bill. This is Ben Falber. I'm a project manager on the energy storage team. And we have this energy storage soft cost reduction program, which this webinar is a part of, like Bill mentioned. So on the storage team, that also includes Tony Abate and Jason Doling. So when we say soft costs, these are the non-hardware costs like permitting, interconnection, customer acquisition, business model and revenue certainty, and aspects where a lack of confidence in the technology or the performance of these systems can influence financing costs. We have two main investments. One is, I'll start with the one on the right, the PON 3541. This is our value stacking pilot project solicitation. We're looking to reduce costs, increase revenue, while also creating a cleaner and more resilient grid with energy storage. This is for projects that serve the customer, the utility, and or the wholesale market, providing multiple services. That's what we mean by stacking. 50% cost share max. There's funding available for feasibility studies. And these really are meant to serve as bellwether demonstrations to prove out certain business cases that hopefully in the near future on their own can be more scalable and replicable and financeable. So going back to the soft cost program, which I mentioned this webinar is a part of, and we're partnering with New York Best on, those soft costs that I mentioned at the top, the costs associated with them, the way that they influence the total installed cost of energy storage systems. We're looking for a 25% reduction in 3 years, 33% or more in 5 years. We're working with CUNY on permitting issues, looking to streamline the outdoor permitting process in New York City right now. That's where the focus is initially, and we're going to expand out from there, where you're going to see permitting guidelines and technical assistance and training materials. New York Best obviously is our industry partner, guidance on a whole host of issues like market rules, technology options, business models, and as you can see today, they're really serving as a conduit between vendor community utilities, vendor community, and policymakers. Cadmus is our partner in verifying the field performance of storage systems. So if you apply into the PON, you'll be working with Cadmus, where they're going to be collecting the data and helping us produce case studies that really make these projects advance as scalable and replicable projects like I mentioned. And ERS is our customer-facing partner. They are doing a big data analytics project, figuring out who are the best fit customers for energy storage, which is somewhat associated with identifying the market potential for energy storage. Right now, the initial focus on demand charge reduction. and then going out, doing outreach, training, webinars, and the majority of that kind of work and the majority of the work that New York Best is doing is really one-on-one technical assistance. So the fact sheets, the webinars, this content that we're putting out, think of it as a way to get introduced to our team, get introduced to the people involved, and then feel free to follow up with us for one-on-one deep technical assistance as you're actually pursuing projects. So that's it for me, and Bill, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, Ben. And so we're delighted to have a very strong lineup of speakers today. From Con Ed, we have 4 speakers to cover the various aspects of their programs that relate to energy storage and their future strategies around energy storage. So we have Adrian Lally, who is the project manager for storage strategy at Con Ed, Raghu Sudhakara, who is the section manager for regulatory and stakeholder engagement, Griffin Riley, who's the section manager for targeted demand management and demand response, and Sim Zakharov, that's the manager for demand response programs. So they will be presenting a number of different aspects of the various programs at Con Edison. The agenda that we're going to have today is I'll present a very brief introduction, and then Raghu, Griffin, and Sim will go through a number of the different programs at Con Ed that might relate to energy storage. And then Adrian will present some work on future business models and Con Ed's strategy around energy storage. And then we'll round out the discussion of the other utilities in the states and kind of highlight some of the activities that are going on at the other investor-owned utilities around the state of New York, and then move into a Q&A discussion. So with that said, there's a lot of activity in the utility space in New York State right now. As you're probably well aware, New York State began the REV initiative a few years ago, Reforming the Energy Vision. It's what REV stands for. And in the utility direct initiatives associated with REV, there are a number of programs that relate to energy storage. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of these, and our Con Ed friends will dig a little bit deeper into a few of them shortly. The first area are REV demo programs. An important aspect of REV is to test new business models, and so each utility in the state are doing demonstration programs, and these demo programs are really intended for business model development as opposed to new technology development, to test new business models and to learn new ways to bring the new services to the grid. The second very important aspect of the REV initiatives is that they've actually required each utility to do 2 energy storage projects. And then the reasoning behind this is to encourage the utilities that haven't had as much experience in energy storage to utilize the technology to solve problems and to develop a greater familiarity and understanding with energy storage in order to foster further projects and develop different strategies around utilizing energy storage in the future. The third area that relates to storage and really to DERs more broadly, are non-wire solutions. So the concept behind non-wire solutions is that it's opposed to using traditional ways to address load issues and other utility investment rationale. There is a desire to employ new and different solutions that may be more efficient, have more optionality, may have other advantages to these challenges. And we'll talk quite a bit about the non-wire solutions. This is where we're seeing a lot of activity around the state. The last area directly on the REV initiatives are earning adjustment mechanisms. And it's important to understand that historically utility compensation has been relied upon capital deployed. And the idea behind REV is to change how that compensation mechanism works. So as opposed to rewarding the deployment of capital, the idea of earning adjustment mechanisms are to reward actions that improve the efficiency of the grid and of the utility services. So there are a number of earning adjustments mechanisms that are being built into each utility's rate case as they move forward. And these earning adjustment mechanisms include a number of different areas. One of the most significant for energy storage are system peak reductions. So as a utility is doing their rate case, they are projecting system peak levels and then looking at adjustments for that and also for efficiency and for other things, where they'll be rewarded by having reduced that component and thereby reducing cost overall on the grid. So these are some of the key areas that are drivers that happening under REV that will increase and create markets for energy storage in the state. Other related activities that you're going to be hearing about today are demand management programs. Con Ed has been a leader in this area. We're going to hear from them about how to reduce demand on the grid and their programs with regard to that, and then demand relief programs, which each of the utilities have that are targeted programs to reduce system and local circuit demand. And both of these are areas that can be very attractive for energy storage going forward. A last area, which is a little bit more future-looking, but is also important, are some areas under the DSIP plans. And DSIP stands for Distributed System Implementation Plans that each of the utilities file under REV. And these are their plans in order to create this new environment on the grid where we can be moving to more transactive markets at the edge of the grid, and also improving a number of features with respect to bringing distributed energy resources onto the grid. And so many of these pieces we've been talking about so far fall into the DSIPs as well, but there are two additional areas that are being looked at under the DSIPs that potentially impact energy storage going forward. The first is hosting capacity. So the utilities are developing hosting capacity maps for how much DERs can be put onto a circuit. And when you think DERs in this case, primarily people are thinking around solar, but other DERs as well. And clearly, the ability to do that is impacted by concerns with backflow of electricity and saturation of circuits that can be addressed through energy storage or mitigated in part through energy storage. And also electric vehicle supply equipment. It's the forecasts for electric vehicles continue to raise and continue to go up. I think we reached the psychological transition point of a couple of years ago, people thinking that electric vehicles may or may not be in our future, to people now viewing it as very likely to be a major player going forward and really starting to think about how the adoption of electric vehicles does affect the electricity grid. And so as we're thinking about those things, the electric vehicle supply equipment part of the DSIPs plans are very, very important. So with those a little bit of underpinning, we're now going to move over to our Con Ed colleagues. And I'm going to turn it over to Raghu to begin the Con Ed discussions. And they'll be talking about an overview of the Con Ed's battery participation in Con Ed's programs, and then a few of these particular programs in a little bit more detail. So let me turn it over to Raghu.
Thank you, Bill, and good afternoon, everybody. I think you kind of set the stage really well for us to sort of take it on from here and then give some insight into the landscape, at least as far as the Con Edison territory is concerned. So I'll just sort of cover like a little bit of the overview, and then we'll pass it off to Griffin Riley, who'll talk about the non-wire solution piece, and then Sim, who'll talk a little more about demand management program that we have that you alluded to, Bill, and Adrian, who will then talk about our demonstration projects. It's looking at new business models. So if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So I think really kind of wanted to set the stage in terms of the regulatory landscape or even the regulatory reality as far as Con Edison is concerned today. So, the New York Best members and others that are participating on the webinar have a clear understanding of where we are. An issue that has come again and again, at least in the Con Ed territory, is the ability of batteries to be able to export onto the grid. I think the one thing wanted to sort of let everyone know, in case there's still some confusion in that area, is batteries currently in all our non-wire solution areas are allowed to export. This came about in one of our petitions related to the Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program, which was one of our early non-wire solution that we sort of pioneered in the state. Also wanted to make sure that everybody's aware that batteries can participate in our demand response programs, and I mean exporting batteries, because all customers who operate under one of our tariffs called the SC11 or Service Class 11 tariff export onto the grid, and that export is eligible to participate in our commercial demand response program. So, and just wanted to make sure that people are aware that batteries are included in it. Thirdly, I just wanted to sort of allude to the value of DER proceeding that's still ongoing. Under that proceeding, in the phase 1, batteries can be co-located with other net metering technologies such as solar and fuel cells, and allow to export onto the grid and take advantage of the value of DER tariff. And under the phase 2, they're also looking at standalone storage, and I don't want to go too much into detail there, only because that proceeding is still ongoing as far as the phase 2 is concerned. Lastly, just wanted to also make everyone aware that Con Ed filed a petition with the Public Service Commission, our regulators, to allow storage to export onto the primary system or the secondary system, which is the lower voltage system. And we sort of filed this petition because we wanted to make sure, at least from a tariff perspective, there are no barriers for batteries looking to locate in our system and export onto our system. I mean, having said that, I know there's other issues, and NYSERDA talked about soft costs, and so there's definitely more issues to address, but I think we're making some good moves in a direction where batteries can participate. And Bill, I know you also alluded to earnings adjustment mechanisms, so I just want to briefly mention two quick things there. We have a outcome-based earnings adjustment mechanism, which is really not a funded program, if you will, but where Con Ed has an incentive to facilitate more battery adoptions, and that's through our DER, or Distributed Energy Resource Utilization. Batteries are counted under that, and so we have additional motivation, if you will, to bring on more batteries onto our system. And we also have what we call the programmatic earnings adjustment mechanism, which is a funded program that Sim will talk more about, which is part of the demand management program, where we have, we're very interested in getting batteries onto the system to reduce our system peak. So with that, I'm going to just pass it off to Griffin, who will talk about the non-wire solutions.
Thank you, Raghu. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just do a high-level overview of non-wire solutions. There's quite a lot to this subject that we don't quite have time for today. So for more detail, you can visit coned.com/nonwires. You'll see there's also a longer webinar there that goes into some more detail about how selection is done and details of projects themselves. And on that webpage, there's also a full list of all the projects that we have upcoming for us. But from a high-level view, just to talk about what non-wire solutions are and some of the more immediate opportunities, just talk a little bit about what we're talking about when we say non-wire solutions. So Con Edison is a summer peaking electric system. We have the 5 boroughs and Westchester, which together is about 13,500 megawatts of total capacity necessary. We peaked at 13,322 a couple summers ago. And what we do at the end of every summer is look at what the actual forecast is for, what the actual load was through that summer for every piece of our system, and then compare it to what the traditional capacity to serve that load is. And so we look at the peak top usage, and we weather adjust that for the hotter summers in the future. And then we look at what we think the forecast in that region of our city, of our system is going to be, and we project that load out 10 to 20 years. We do a 10-year forecast for our load growth for major systems like substations and things of this nature, and we can then project using that load forecast when in the future our system will no longer be capable of supplying that load. And so that again is the peak need that we're looking at when we do this comparison. So then our folks know in that year, whenever the infrastructure capacity is no longer capable of supplying the load, we need to do some sort of upgrade to the infrastructure. And so on larger projects like a substation, that can include, for instance, adding a whole other transformer. It could be moving load from one area of our system to another that currently has capacity, or it could be potentially building an entirely new substation, which is the case we were working with for the Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program that Raghu earlier mentioned. So we would need to spend a significant capital spend to upgrade that capacity, and we don't do it in increments. We do it for, if we need to add a new transformer, that's going to be a lot more capacity available. It creates a lot of headroom above what the load will be, and we're going to be good in that area for a number of years. What Non-Wires Solutions is trying to do is to defer the need to invest in that infrastructure. Next slide, please. So the whole concept is if we can put in customer-sided solutions or some utility-sided solutions that changes the load forecast and lowers that down so that the year that the new infrastructure need is required, if we can change that load forecast, we add value to all of our customers by not spending that money. So that T&D deferral value is one of the lines in the benefits of the benefit cost analysis for Non-Wire Solution, and that BCA handbook is available publicly. You can get it at the DPS website. You can also get it on coned.com. There are many other categories that go in that benefit, including offset generation charges and things of this nature, carbon reduction, et cetera. But the main purpose of the project is to do this deferral. And so we look for all areas in our system that we're going to need to invest in traditional wire solutions, and then we look to see whether or not we can do a non-wires project in that area. Next slide, please. So when we look at peak need, when we're upgrading our system, we need to make sure that we can push through those megawatts in our system. So we're just looking at that top peak requirement for any individual component of our system. But a non-wires approach doesn't necessarily need to supply or reduce the total peak need for the entire 24-hour period. So this is an illustrative example of what we do when we're putting together a non-wires solution. We look at this red line that you see is the capacity minus essentially what we need to make up for so that we don't have to build a traditional solution year over year. So you can see, for instance, in this example, we have no problems until 11 a.m. Our system is capable of supplying all the load in the peak day that we forecast, but then we start having a deficit, and so that red line becomes what we need to make up for a new non-wire solution. So we can piece together many different components of customer-sided solutions like CHP, fuel cells, solar, and batteries to make up the need for this, to delay the need for us to build a traditional solution. And so that's what my team does when we put out a request for proposal. We bring all those proposals back and we look to build a portfolio of solutions so that we can meet the need throughout the daytime. And what we ask all respondents to do is to give us what their project is capable of in terms of reduction hour over hour so that we're capable of building this portfolio. Once we have a portfolio built, we'll then contract and then implement and therefore delaying the need for that traditional solution. You can see here batteries are in here in blue. That you can see that we're adding load to the system in the nighttime as those batteries charge, and then on the right side of the graph those batteries are outputting, helping us meet our need for this non-wire solution. So batteries definitely have the capability of providing a very important part of our portfolio, and they're not necessarily needed for the entire time of the day. And one more important thing here is that this is only needed during the peak times of our summer of our summer load. So when the temperature gets hot and we start having the highest loads come in, that's when we're going to need to dispatch these batteries. But respondents to these RFPs can propose using those batteries for other revenue-generating sources so that they can lower the cost that Con Edison has to pay and therefore be more competitive in their RFP proposal itself. Next slide, please. So where we currently are, the BQDM program itself is in implementation. We were successful at relieving the 52 megawatts by the summer of 2018, and we did that under budget, so we're actually going to continue that program. We were authorized to continue spend to try to continue delaying infrastructure upgrades from 2019, where we currently are, out as far as we possibly can. So there will be something coming out soon, probably by the end of this month, where we'll look for more advanced technologies to be installed in 2019 and 2020 for our availability as far out as we can go. 7 new non-wire solutions were identified in our distributed system implementation plan that we posted in 2016, and we are in the process of identifying new non-wire solutions in our most recent load forecast that we're doing this fall. 2 of them went out in the beginning, around the beginning of the summer this past year at Columbus Circle Network and Hudson. We're currently reviewing those projects to see whether or not we can implement them. We just recently released a new RFP for Water Street, Williamsburg, and Plymouth Street, and this was released on October 31st. It's what we currently have out in market, and those responses are due on January 12th. We have a very large need there, and if you look at the RFP, you can see that there's a significant ask, and there's also a significant deferral value for us there. And then at the end, actually just in another week, we'll be releasing our Flushing project, West 42nd Street and Pennsylvania, and there will be more opportunities that come out next year based on our newest load forecast. Again, I refer you to coned.com/nonwires if you'd like more information on our current programs. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sim.
Thanks, Griffin. So the demand management program has been around since about 2014, and it has been incentivizing battery projects since inception. Currently, it's as part of a rate-based program for Con Edison through 2019. The goal of the program is to reduce the system-wide peak demand, which typically occurs on the hottest weekdays. The batteries are not the only measure that's accepted. The program includes the program incentivizes pretty much any measure that reduces peak load, except for solar and lighting. There are strict application deadlines, and we would encourage you to take a look at our website for those details. The program requires that reductions happen 2 to 6 p.m. On days when demand response events are in effect, either a demand response event from the New York Independent System Operator or Con Edison. And that reduction of 2 to 6 p.m. is required regardless of the time of the demand response event. And participation is required for a term of 10 years. As far as obtaining incentives from other programs, that is not allowed for DMP participants. However, DMP participants are allowed to participate in demand response programs for additional revenue. For 2019, there's a new requirement that the program will have, a cash collateral requirement, this will be the lower of either $150,000 per project or 10% of the incentive. The reason we're implementing this requirement is to is to make sure that the jobs that we do get will actually be installed, and the collateral would be returned once the job is completed. Next slide, please. The program has had increasing goals, as well as an increasing budget from 2017 through 2019. The 2018 funding has been pretty much allocated, and we're basically, you can still put in projects for 2018 and be placed on a waiting list. For 2019, the next opportunity, the next deadline to apply will be on March 1st of this year. And the one thing I wanted to point out is that we do prefer battery projects, especially battery projects that have a letter, what's called a letter of no objection from the Fire Department of New York, namely that they've already gone through the review with the Fire Department and obtained that letter from them. At least 50% of the megawatts that you see listed should come from what's called advanced technology projects, and these include advanced controls, ice storage, and batteries. So we do want to see a good number of batteries in our portfolio. Next slide, please. As far as the incentive levels, the projects are selected using kind of an auction mechanism where they apply and are selected by Con Edison based on a number of criteria. By far the biggest criterion is the requested incentive level on a dollar per kW basis, and the request cannot exceed the numbers that you see here. For 2019, that would be $13.50 per kilowatt. Additional caps on the requested incentive are that the incentive cannot exceed 50% of the project cost, either the lower of the actual or what's determined by Con Edison, cannot exceed $4 million per project, or $8 million per market partner. Okay, next slide, please. So as far as the project timeline, again, for 2018, if you have a letter of no objection already from the FDNY for your project, you'll certainly you'll move up in the priority listing in our wait list. The installation deadline in 2018 is September 14th of 18. For 2019, as I mentioned earlier, the application deadline is March 1st of this year, and we may, depending on how many megawatts we obtain in this auction round, we may or may not have another auction for 2019. And if we do have another one, it would be sometime in the last quarter of 2018. Okay, next slide, please. So that pretty much concludes. I just wanted to point out, strongly encourage you to visit our website. It has all the program rules. The simple way is coned.com/savings, and you will find the demand management program link here. You can also email us at demandmanagement@coned.com. Thank you. And I'd like to now hand it over to Adrienne Valley, who will talk about the innovative storage business models.
Hi. So thanks to the three of them. I think they laid out all of the future opportunities at Con Edison. I'm just going to try and quickly run through what it is we're actually doing from a strategic standpoint as part of the demonstration projects that Bill mentioned at the top of the meeting. As a reminder, these are the demonstration projects under Rev Track 1 order, and unlike most utility pilots, these are really focused on business model innovation as opposed to technology. So back in early 2016, we put out an RFI for new business model innovative ideas from the market. We received 47 back. We took most of 2016 to kind of work through those and vet those. And in early 2017, we filed 2 projects with the PSC, and both of them were approved. And I'm going to spend most of our remaining time for Con Edison really going through those. So if we could move forward a slide. I think everybody probably on the call knows this, but these are the 3 main reasons that Con Edison is really focused on storage and focused on innovating the business models to help get over some of the cost challenges that we see today. The Clean Energy Standard of 50 by 30, our system peak. I think all of the programs that we just went through really clearly illustrate that Con Edison has a very high peak that we're trying to manage with innovative solutions. And one of those solutions is this ability to have the non-wires, the NWSs that Griffin talked about. These business models are really looking at what the market can use to partner with Con Edison in order to bid into these NWSs. So the 2 projects I'm going to talk about are really business models we envision developers utilizing with us in order to participate in the non-wire solution at a competitive point and come in under all those caps that Sim just kindly went through for us. Next slide. So when we set out to do the REV demonstration projects and really innovate around battery storage business models, we took a step back and looked at the existing models today. And the common theme that we found across all of them as hampering the economics was that each business model, for the most part, really only limits storage to one value stream. And that one value stream has not been enough historically to overcome the project economics, to make a positive project economics within the Con Edison territory. So for integrated PV plus storage, really relying on that resiliency payment and a little bit of the ITC to come up with the storage costs. For the utility owned, we're seeing more and more of that with each of the non-wire solutions, but again, that's just the capital deferral has to be so large to offset the cost of the batteries. We're not seeing those battery storage projects be as economic yet. And then the final one is behind the meter, which we do have a lot more of, but the market limiter on that one is that there's a finite number of customers really who have the right load shape to really take advantage of this model. And from the utility perspective, there hasn't been a lot of coordination with Con Edison when customers and developers are installing this model to really make sure that the size, dispatch coincidence, and location also provide enough of a benefit to our system in order to get that T&D deferral benefit. So that was the high-level analysis we did around what we were looking to innovate. And what we basically came across is, if you move to the next slide, that we want to go after stacked value. I think everybody's read the RMI report on the stacked value of storage and how this is really a way to make these projects more economic. This is a very illustrative estimate, so please don't go home and say Adrian said that batteries cost $30 million. But this was just an estimate we did for one of the areas in our territory. And this is, I think, the best graphical representation of what we're trying to accomplish with our demonstration projects and where we see the value of batteries coming in. And it's the stacked value. So the T&D deferral value obviously has the greatest benefit to Con Edison. Each of the projects that I'm working on also try to go after a wholesale market component. We are working with the NYISO in the pilot programs and in their DER roadmap to help try and increase that blue bar so that as the blue bar increases and the costs come down, we're really able to have a greater proliferation of storage on our system. Next slide. So this is the first one of my 2 projects. We call it Beyond Behind the Meter, or Beyond BTM. If you're looking for PSC filings, it's filed as commercial battery storage. This model is innovative in that it is a customer-sited but front-of-the-meter solution. And what it really does is get over that barrier I talked about with the coordination of the utility. So very much like an NWS, we are working with GI Energy and identified a handful of networks in which we see an upcoming constraint. GI Energy then went and acquired customers in those territories, and instead of doing a complicated tariff discussion and modeling around demand charge savings, they simply approached them with a real estate proposition of renting their space for batteries. So now we're providing the benefit to the customer, but we've completely disconnected the project economics from the customer's load profile, because the battery is now first and foremost dispatched by Con Edison to meet our load needs. So we have a contract with GI Energy for that right of first dispatch, like a capacity contract or storage as a service, if you will. And then the remainder of the time, GI Energy is going to dispatch the assets into the NYISO wholesale markets, and we share in the revenue and the upside of that business model. It's 4 megawatts, 4 megawatt hours spread across 4 customer sites, and we plan for this to be in operation by the end of 2018. Next slide. My next project is Storage on Demand. This is a mobile battery solution. It is 3 tractor trailers that total up to 1.5 megawatts, 4 megawatt hours. So each of these trailers is 500 kW, 1.34 megawatt hours. That sizing is very intentional because we are going to participate, we're going to go after the capacity market in NYISO, in addition to the energy and ancillary services in the future, not in year one. This works very much like a mobile generator. When we first decided on this project, we thought we would use it as a mobile generator when we identify a system peak during our summer planning, summer prep. We would roll it out for the summer and have it provide assistance on peak shaving days. The remainder of the time, NRG would bid it into wholesale markets, and again, both partners would share in the upside. I think we've really had kind of a field of dreams. If you build it, they will come moment, and the more we get into the design aspects of these trailers, we've really found a lot of additional grid benefits on our systems, like voltage support, supporting electric cranes, and other temporary construction upgrades that we need to support on our system. And so we're finding a lot of opportunities to actually stack the T&D value. The great thing about this business model is, if any of y'all have actually applied to our NWSs, you know that these are finite year programs. And so with stationary batteries, you would have to pay the cost if you want to continue participating in those programs to move them to a new location. With the mobile aspect, we're really hoping to capture multiple NWS opportunities, multiple T&D deferral benefits on top of voltage support, on top of supporting customer construction needs, really with one 10-year asset. So we really think that this model has an opportunity to not just do one T&D deferral, but multiple to get that stacked value. Final slide. So I'm sure if you are doing any development of batteries in New York, you're familiar with a lot of these challenges that we're working through. I think one of the great things about the demonstration projects for both the PSC, the NYISO, and Con Edison is we're really hoping to use these demonstration projects and our quarterly reporting on them to help push and make a case for storage, finalize the roadmap for permitting storage in our territory, really help with those soft costs to greater open up the market in our territory. I apologize, I tried to get through that in our time. Please feel free to ask any questions. But I think with that, we'll turn it back over to talk about what the other utilities are doing with storage in our territory, or in New York.
Thanks, Adrian. So, as we, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. As you just heard, Con Ed has a lot of activity going on in storage. And as we outlined, each of the utilities in the state will be doing two storage demonstrations. And many of the utilities, all of the utilities have NWS projects, and a number of them have rev demos, some of which include storage as well. I'm going to just very quickly, in the time remaining, go through a couple of the utilities NWSs, because those are, I think, of particular interest. As I said, each of the utilities have NWS's presently. Central Hudson has had 4, but there are no open ones at the moment. But we are expecting future NWSs from Central Hudson. I'm sorry, not going to say Con Edison, from Central Hudson shortly. National Grid has quite a few NWS opportunities. They've had 4 that are now closed. There are 3 that are presently open that are listed here. And then they have outlined many, many more coming forward. So of particular interest to energy storage from our looks at these discussions with National Grid, the Buffalo solicitation, and if we move to the next page here, the East Pulaski transformer upgrade that's scheduled to come out shortly are ones that National Grid has pointed to as areas that may be very attractive. So we encourage you to take a look at those, and you can see that they have quite a few here listed that are expected to be coming out in the early part of next year. Moving to NYSEG, likewise, NYSEG has a substantial number of non-wires solutions coming out, and have been doing a lot of exploration in the areas of energy storage. There are 2 listed here that are open at the moment, Stillwater and New Gardenville. And New Gardenville particularly is something that has a very relatively low duration of need, so it's something that may be quite amenable to an energy storage solution. If we move to Orange and Rockland, they likewise have a number of NWSs coming out shortly. They have the Pomona opportunity that is open at the moment, and that likewise has a reasonable level of duration need, making it an interesting opportunity to explore. And then finally, with regard to the direct investor-owned utilities regulated by the PSC, Rochester Gas and Electric. Similarly, a number of non-wire solutions. Obviously, we're not going through all of these, but these are here for your reference for when you look at the slides later. There's one complete. There are none open at the moment, but there are a number that are expected to be coming quite shortly. Just to round out, and to leave a little time for questions, to round out the state utilities, of course, LIPA, Long Island Power Authority, the electric utilities there operated by PSEG. They are not directly regulated by the PSC, so they're not directly following exactly the same rev format as the other utilities, but they are following a similar format in parallel. In fact, they've just recently outlined a value stack similar to the value stack for DERs that PSC has been developing. They currently do not have any open RFPs, but they have actually just recently awarded a number of larger energy storage contracts, and we actually were just meeting with them last week, and they outlined a number of future opportunities that they're exploring. So we expect to see a number of future opportunities coming out of PSEG Long Island. And also, interestingly, there's been a lot of exploration about offshore wind on Long Island being a contributor to some of these solutions, and that makes for another dimension of an opportunity for energy storage. In addition to all of the utility opportunities, do want to reiterate the NYSERDA PON that Ben mentioned earlier. It's a very good opportunity for projects going in, particularly for value stacking going forward, and details are here on this slide for your future reference. There have been some questions which we'll touch upon, and Adrian mentioned some of the challenges, particularly associated with permitting and zoning and siting. The part of the NYSERDA team has been working very hard on the permitting, siting, and zoning. That's led by CUNY, DNVGL, Meister, and Cadmus under NYSERDA, preparing materials for AHGs, and also particularly offering technical guidance and assistance. And there's a link here to an independent safety report for batteries for Con Ed and New York City, and the New York City Fire Department particularly. I'd encourage you, if you are interested in these areas, to reach out to New York Best or reach out to the technical assistance for the people listed here in NYSERDA for help with the New York City siting. Lastly, just to wrap up and leave a few minutes for questions, we have, in addition to the permitting and siting, there's a lot of activity right now in the state on a roadmap for energy storage. We were delighted that a few weeks ago the governor signed the energy storage legislation, which, by the way, passed unanimously, both parties and houses in the state government, which is very nice to see in today's world. That legislation calls for setting targets for energy storage in the state and creating a roadmap to get there for policy rationale, and that's part of the NYSERDA roadmap work going on right now. So that's going to be very important as we go forward. There are a number of resources that I'd like to direct you to for support here. Con Ed outlined a number of their resources that are very good avenues of information. In addition, the NYSERDA Soft Cost team has a website. New York Best has resources that are outlined here. And if you're interested in following the non-wire solutions, the RevConnect website has a complete updated listing of non-wire solutions that we've been going through here as well. So with that quick run through of the rest of the state, we've left a couple of minutes for questions. I would encourage you to please enter your questions into the chat box, and we can take them, as many as we can take in the time remaining, and then we'll also try to answer further ones if we can post the webinar. So with that said, please go ahead and start entering questions. There are a number have already come in, and I'm going to ask a couple of these to our Con Ed representatives, and we'll touch upon a few of them. One of the questions that came in was around the statement that for non-wire solutions, customers can export with energy storage, and there was a question about clarification of that. Is that only for SC11 customers that can export from batteries, or can all customers in an NWS zone export? And particularly the question also goes on to particularly ask about small residential SC1 customers.
All customers can export in non-wire solution areas. They could export at this time to the primary system, and all inverter-based storage, if the Public Service Commission approves the Con Ed petition, would be able to export to the secondary as well, as long as they're inverter-based.
I'd like to just add to that yes, you can export, but that is still limited by the size of the service that's currently there that you're planning on installing that. So if you do need an upgrade, if you're looking to export even more than what the service is capable of, those infrastructure upgrades would be included in the analysis for the project costs as part of the BCA for the non-wires analysis.
Very good, thank you. Another question that came in is around utility ownership of energy storage devices, and Con Ed's position both on utility ownership or non-utility ownership for energy storage as part of an NWS, and also kind of a similar question came in with respect to demo projects going forward. So your thoughts on how this is going to evolve, and does Con Ed have preferences in these regards?
Yeah, regarding utility ownership, I think the Commission has issued like some orders that sort of specify what's allowed and what's not allowed. There are conditions under which the utility can own. If they want to reach out to us directly, we could sort of speak more to the person who asked the question about those conditions. I think so. With that given regulatory reality, I guess only where those conditions are satisfied would we even be considering something. I'll just note One thing, however, on the Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program, there were two sort of buckets there, customer side solutions and utility side solutions, that was approved by the commission. And under the utility side solutions, Con Ed is building a storage facility on one of Con Ed properties to help alleviate that reliability constraint associated with that particular program.
Yeah, and just for demo projects, what we're really after with demo projects is just trying to find the lowest cost storage solution for our customers and as part of these NWSs. So I don't know if that question was spurred by my slides on one was utility owned and one was customer owned. We're looking at anything that really just provides reliability at the lowest cost to meet the need.
Very good, thank you. So the next question kind of requires jumping back to a slide. So I'm going to jump us back to slide 11 for a second, if I can. We'll try to. There we go. The question was is around a little more texture on this slide as far as they noted all the different colored bars here. And we're curious in understanding the slide a little bit further as far as what that means and how that stack is related to the graph shown.
Sure. So I kept that very high level and didn't put in labels because I was just trying to get across the concept that many different types of solutions would be put together in a portfolio that would provide the relief necessary. So again, that red line, we need to fill up everything below that red line in order for us to be successful in the non-wires. So everything to the left there is just what the solution will provide in the off-peak hours. But the peaking hours is really where we concentrate our portfolio development. And so I do have blue there as a relatively small amount where batteries are in this particular illustration, but certainly batteries could take a much larger percentage of the portfolio if they come in cost competitive to other measures. In this particular slide, you can imagine that potentially there's CHP as some of the relief. Energy efficiency could be part of that. Demand response could be part of that. So each individual bar would be a different type of measure. Fuel cells would be included. I don't have any photovoltaics in this example because you see all of the, or almost all of them. Actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. The orange is photovoltaics. So, PV can be part of the solution, but essentially it's just trying to show various different types of measures, distributed energy resources that we might stack together in a portfolio to meet the need under that red line. And again, batteries could be a large portion of that portfolio all the way to not part of the portfolio, depending on the responses and the competitive nature of the bids.
Okay, great. And we do have a few more questions, so I'll try to get a few more rapid fire in the last minute or two here. There's a question on, for the first storage project with GI Energy, how much notice will Con Ed be giving GI before they call the storage asset? And they're particularly interested in how that would affect their ability to work in the wholesale market.
Yeah, we are, for the majority of the dispatches, we will give them more than 24 hours notice so that they can continue to participate in the NYISO market. And we're working with NYISO on how they can self-schedule on days where they're planning to dispatch for Con Edison. We are also hoping to test emergency dispatch, but in that scenario, if we don't give them more than 24 hours notice, they are not obligated to dispatch for Con Edison if we have like a feeder go down suddenly.
Okay, great. And then there's a few questions about permitting and also about your VP virtual power plant program that was discontinued this summer. And so one of the questions was, their understanding was that was discontinued as a result of FDNY and DOB constraints. It got cut off a little bit, but I think the implication of the rest of the question was if those constraints are lifted, would you be doing that program? And then also, can you speak to outdoor permitting batteries, how long, and maybe I could take a little of the permitting if you want, but maybe I'll ask the VPP question first.
All right. So on the permitting side, we've been working with the FDNY and the Department of Buildings NYSERDA, as mentioned earlier, NYSERDA has been playing a role along with CUNY in trying to develop guidelines for developers to help facilitate to help developers understand what FDNY and the DOB would be looking for to facilitate the permitting process. Generally, the lead acid jobs have had a much easier time going through the permitting process. Lithium ion outdoor we have had a few lithium ion outdoor projects that received the letters of no objection from the FDNY. As far as indoor lithium ion, at this point the FDNY isn't approving those types of projects. For the purpose of the DNP, we do want to see a letter of no objection and make sure that that give a strong indication to us that the project will have a high chance of being completed.
Yep. Very good. And actually, we are now a minute over, so we do have to wrap up. So just one last word on the permitting. For any people interested in that, you can certainly reach out to New York Best or the NYSERDA Soft Cost team, and we're likely to be having a webinar on that pretty soon, shortly as well. I want to thank our Con Ed speakers for doing an excellent job of giving us an overview of all their programs today, and thank you all for joining us. This webinar will be posted early next week for those of you who are interested in copies of it on our website, and we do look forward and encourage you please to take the survey as you exit the webinar. So once again, thank you to our Con Ed friends and to you participating, and have a great afternoon. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thanks.